What does it mean to swallow a camel? That hurts just thinking about it. And yet Jesus uses it as a great illustration. Listen in today.
Welcome to Everyday Truth with Kurt Skelly. We believe the Bible is true and relevant to everyone, everywhere, every day. If today's conversation is a help to you, take a moment to leave a review or share it with a friend. Thanks for listening. Now, let's join Kurt for today's episode.
Okay, friends, ready to jump right back into a really scathing message that Jesus is preaching to some religious leaders. Wow, I just read this message and it gives me a goosebumps to think about how awkward and convicting this must have been to all of those that were listening that day. Of course, not the Pharisees themselves. They were hard-hearted and they just had the inability to see themselves. And that's often the worst place that you can be. The worst place you can be in life is a place where you don't see yourself. That's what James talks about in James 1, that when we are hearers of the word but not doers, we actually deceive ourselves. And we begin to see the Bible not as a tool by which our own lives can be examined, but as a microscope by which we examine other people's lives. So we begin to see the mote in other people's eyes. Like David, we see this man that stole a sheep, but we can't see ourselves and our own egregious sins. So Jesus is laying it on thick. He's giving these Pharisees the what for, but remember, they have an opportunity here to admit, to repent. And while humility is a hard pill to swallow, it is the only way by which we can come back to God. It is the only way by which we can be made right. We have to see our own sinfulness. And watch how Jesus exposes them some more. We're beginning at verse 16 today, where he says to these leaders, "Woe unto you, ye blind guides, which say, Whosoever shall swear by the temple, it is nothing. But whosoever shall swear by the gold of the temple, he is debtor. Ye fools and blind, for whether is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifieth the gold? And whosoever shall swear by the altar, it is nothing. But whosoever sweareth by the gift that's upon it, he is guilty. Ye fools and blind, for whether is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifieth the gift? Therefore, or rather, whoso therefore shall swear by the altar, sweareth by it and by all things thereon. And whosoever shall swear by the temple, sweareth by it and by him that dwelleth therein. And he that shall swear by heaven, sweareth by the throne of God and by him that sitteth thereon." So, wow, that's a mouthful. What is Jesus saying? Basically, what Jesus is doing in verses 16 through 22 is he is exposing their really fraudulent system of making oaths. We would call this today legalese. Yeah, have you ever read lawyer gobbledygook and you're like, wow, these lawyers, they know how to word things in such a way where they can wiggle out or create a loophole for themselves and all this fancy legal maneuvering. We're all familiar with that. Well, that's what was happening back then. They had a series of oaths, and an oath was a way by which you would guarantee what you were saying. It's kind of like signing in triplicate or docu-signing or, putting your fingerprint down. So they would have a series of oaths that were more and more or less and less binding. Like, I am bound by this because I swore by this, but I'm not totally bound by this because I swore by this. And what Jesus was saying is the whole system is wrong because the whole system undermines the most important thing, which is honesty itself, your word itself. And what Jesus is saying is, you can have all of these loopholes and all of these various ways by which you are getting away with things. And what happened was the Pharisees and they made money on this because they would make people swear that they were going to dedicate their assets to the temple. And because they made that oath, now that their elderly parents need help, well, that money is really not mine because I made an oath to the temple. Therefore, I don't have to care for my aging parents. And there are multiple applications of this. There are multiple ways by which they did this. And what Jesus was saying is the whole system is fraudulent. The whole system is upside down. James spoke to this as well in James chapter 5 when he said, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea and your nay, nay, lest you fall into condemnation. So what did James do? James took the whole thing and brought it down to the most foundational principle, which is this: just tell the truth. Just be honest. And what Jesus was singling out here was the blatant dishonesty of the religious leaders, that they were loose with the truth. That's why when you stand in a courtroom today or sit in a courtroom today as a witness, you have to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Yeah, you're not swearing by something, you're swearing to do something. You're affirming that your word means something before God. That's what you're affirming, to tell the truth, but then watch this, the whole truth. Why? Because sometimes we lie by not giving the full story. But everything we said was technically correct. We just didn't say it all. No, tell the truth, the whole truth, then watch this, and nothing but the truth. Sometimes we tell the whole truth, but then we also embellish. We add other things too. And Jesus said, no, let your yea be yea, let your word be your word, and tell the complete story. Don't go beyond the complete story, and let your word mean something. And these religious leaders could not be trusted. Why? Because their word could not be trusted. That's why the very first thing that God expects of you is for you to keep your word. The most important thing that you could teach your children is for them to keep their word. It's the most important thing because without keeping your word, without honesty, there is nothing. That's why I often say the most important word in your marriage is trust. And the greatest way to build trust is to keep your word. I find it interesting in Ephesians 4, which is the practical section of the book of Ephesians, when the Apostle Paul said, all right, well, now that you're saved, you've put on that new man, you are filled with the Holy Spirit of God. Now, in a practical sense, begin to put off those old life habits, begin to put on new life habits, and he begins with this: put away lying. Let every man speak truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. So start with telling the truth. Start with that. Start with a commitment to your word. That's what God gives us. God gives us his word. What is his word? Holy, true, accurate, timeless. Not one jot or tittle shall fail. What's God saying? God's saying you can trust me. You can trust everything about me because you can trust what I say. And Jesus is going to the foundation of the hypocrisy of these religious leaders by saying, you need to tell the truth. And all of your legal gymnastics do not take away the fact that you are really at your heart dishonest and lying with ulterior motives. So there's a lot there, isn't there? So we're down to verse 22. Now look at the next one in verse 23, where Jesus says, woe unto you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and you have omitted the weightier matters of the law. Then he lists them, like judgment, mercy, and faith. Those first things, tithing on those small herbs and spices, these ought ye to have done. So Jesus is not saying, well, that you shouldn't be careful about tithing on these smaller things. No, that was an obligation that they should have done. But what had happened is they were making a big deal about relatively small levels of obedience, and they were making a small deal about the bigger things like judgment and mercy and faith. These things ought you to have done and not to leave the others undone. You blind guides, you strain at a gnat. So you'll strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. So what is Jesus saying here? Well, I think, first of all, what Jesus is saying is that there are priorities in our spiritual lives. And those priorities are things like the way we treat people. Judgment in the Bible, when it applies to man, refers to the way we treat others. And mercy. In the Old Testament, the word was hesed, which meant a steadfast love. And so judgment and mercy and faith. So here you are counting out all of these individual spices. If you've ever been to Old Jerusalem, you go to some of the spice market stores there, and you can smell all these things and see them. These little fine little specks of spice and herbs, and they would carefully count out 10% to tithe that. And Jesus said, that's all well and good. You should do that. But the most important thing is the way you're treating people, the attitude that you have toward God, and the faithfulness of your heart service. And you do these technical things right, but on the inside, you are not right at all. And then he gives a ludicrous example. And the example he gives is you will strain out a gnat. So a gnat, according to the book of Leviticus, was an unclean insect. And you would say it's the smallest of the unclean things in the Bible, a gnat. To swallow a gnat, to eat a gnat, would make you unclean, ceremonially unclean. So these religious leaders would be very careful to strain what they were drinking to make sure that no bugs got in it. So you'll strain out a gnat. If you see a little gnat floating around, you'll strain that out to maintain your image of cleanness, your image of ceremonial superiority. You'll do that, and then you'll swallow a camel. Now, obviously, this is metaphoric and hyperbolic, but the point here is that a camel was the largest of the unclean animals, the largest. So the gnat is the smallest, so you'll strain out that small thing, but the very big things, he's reiterating what he just said, like judgment and mercy and faith, you will ignore. So you don't care about these big areas of deficiency in your life spiritually because you're making a big deal about these really small external matters in your life. And you have a major, major priority problem. I wonder sometimes if we don't do that, in our own Christian lives, that we make a really, really big deal about things that are relatively small. Like, well, I'm wearing a tie to church. Look at me, and yet, we have a bitterness or an unforgiving spirit toward another believer, which is a big thing. So, and I'm just throwing out illustrations, but the point is we tend to do the same things, don't we? And Jesus says, woe to you when these small things become big things and these huge things are treated as small things. Have a heart for God and therefore a biblical priority when it comes to these things. Pharisees often do not. So we'll stop there in verse number 24. We'll come back to the last little section of the woe section of Matthew 23. So until then, have a great day in the Lord, and we'll see you next time. God bless you, my friends.